And showtime, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest episode of the ChannelPro 5-Minute Roundup. A look at news, trends, and tips for the SMB channel in 5 minutes or thereabouts. My name is Rich Freeman. I am executive editor of the ChannelPro Network and one of your hosts on this program. With me is my co-host, as ever, Eric Simpson, a business transformation and improvement consultant for MSPs and other IT providers. Eric, we're both back home this week.
Yes, and got through some heavy rain yesterday, unusually, and now it's sunny and beautiful here in California. How about you?
Well, it's pretty typical for this time of year in Seattle. Drizzling a little bit, overcast, but actually probably not raining as much as it is in sunny Southern California, apparently.
Yeah, it's clear now, so we got through the worst of it.
Well, as long as we're talking about things that are maybe a little bit unexpected or out of the ordinary, let's plunge into our news story of the week, which is one that could very easily have slipped you by. It wasn't a giant headline grabber, but I thought it was very interesting. Cinex announced this week that they are now the first U.S. distributor for Workplace by Facebook. Now, don't feel bad if you are among the many people who didn't even know that Facebook has a commercial IT product, but they do. They have for a while now. It's called Workplace. And essentially, just think of it as the entire Facebook platform provided in a way that is private for one company to use internally. So it's not connected to the rest of their social network. It's not really designed to connect you to customers or partners. It's an internal communication tool that your folks can use to broadcast information to one another, do instant messaging, do live and recorded videos, pretty much anything that you can do on the regular consumer-oriented Facebook. So Facebook thinks that this is a very familiar tool, a tool that a lot of people use in their private lives, their personal lives, and would therefore be very comfortable using in the office as well. That's the origin of the solution, and the folks at Cinex agree. Now, if you look at the functionality that Workplace provides, you might see some overlap there with something like Office 365 or G Suite. The folks at Cinex are pretty careful to say that they don't actually view Workplace as a replacement for either of those platforms, both of which Cinex sells. And in the case of Office 365, they sell a lot. But their positioning is this isn't a replacement. It's a complement. It does some things that those other platforms do as well, but maybe better and in a way that's more familiar to end users. And for you as a Cinex partner or a cloud service provider, here's a tool that will be very easy for your customers to adopt. It's probably not going to bring in enormous amounts of recurring revenue in terms of the licensing, but you can wrap some services around that in terms of implementation and management. And it's another revenue source for you in your cloud business. But it does raise all sorts of questions. Facebook has an interesting reputation right now in the world. I mean, well beyond the business world in terms of issues like privacy. There's no advertising on this platform, but our partners going to be comfortable selling something branded by Facebook to their customers? Are customers actually going to be comfortable using it these days? A lot of question marks around this, Eric.
Yes, I second the concern about privacy. I'd love to, get a look at the privacy policy for this platform, and it's interesting. Rich, such a crowded field for these types of applications. I mean, you've got Slack, you've got Teams, you've got, G Suite, you've got all Office 365, you've got all these, what we would consider more business ready type of platforms. And then we see Facebook enter into the conversation. And I'm just wondering if there's a strategic influence regarding millennials and that whole mobile workforce and maybe adopting that. I'm scratching my head on how well it's going to do and how quickly it will be adopted. As you mentioned, there are a lot of concerns around Facebook right now at this moment in time, and it sounds like there's shifting sands over there in policy and governance and things like that are happening. And then the other thing that I think is, what kind of, now, granted, it's not connected to the World Wide Web, but, how does someone change their behavior internally? And if we're allowing the reseller to resell that platform to their customers and allow them to communicate with their customers through Facebook, which I'm not sure if that's part of the strategy. But then what is the policy around social media for the staff, and how do you govern that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, no, it's true. This is a social media platform that is is essentially being adapted to used as a collaboration platform, and so there are some differences there, and policies will kind of come into play around that. It's not a straight one-to-one kind of comparison to something like Office 365. A few thoughts on a couple of things that you said there. So first of all, you asked, or are wondering how much uptake will there be for this product among businesses. And it's worth pointing out, Facebook has been selling it direct exclusively up to this point. The product's been out for a while. You've only been able to buy it from Facebook. The reason that they signed this deal with Synex is Facebook says that the sales volume is high enough at this point that they don't feel like they can handle all of the requests for support and assistance and implementation help and so on that they're getting. They have awakened to the fact that they need a channel. And this is their first sort of toehold into creating a channel. And just FYI, I'm in the process of booking some time with somebody at Facebook next week. I'm going to be speaking to somebody to sort of understand longer term what their channel strategy looks like. But they wouldn't be doing this at all. They wouldn't have this agreement in place with Synex if they weren't getting some kind of momentum for workplace, or if they weren't convinced that they could get significant momentum for it. The other thing worth pointing out, because this came up in your comments there too, in terms of the longer term sort of strategic play, Synex has been early to a number of these sort of Microsoft alternative products, including G Suite. Their G Suite business is a tiny fraction of their Office 365 business right now, but it's growing pretty rapidly. It's growing in the high double digits, basically, is what they told me a couple of months ago. And I have had conversations with Synex executives before who have basically pointed out that kids today, grade school, middle school, high school, they're all using G Suite. And when they come out of school and go into the workforce, they're going to be very interested in using tools that are familiar to them and comfortable to them. And so from a Synex standpoint, and maybe from a ChannelPro, a partner standpoint, there is a certain logic to understanding that demand for some of these products might grow in the future. And maybe now's a good time to start positioning yourself to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's a great observation. I mean, getting in front of the born in the cloud generation, right? And positioning for them.
Well, speaking of the born in the cloud generation, or those pesky millennials who may or may not be working for you right now, that has something to do with your tip of the week, Eric.
It does, Rich. And today's tip of the week is all about shadowing your team. Now, I've watched very with a lot of interest some of my clients that make it a part of their process every quarter to migrate into and work out of a specific business unit in their organizations. So they may spend 3 or 4 days or a week in the service desk. I mean, not closing tickets, Rich, but basically they've got a space there, they're working, and they're just listening and watching and understanding what's happening. And then really sometimes in the worst case scenario, finding out, how poorly the team is actually following processes and procedures, and have an opportunity to give some guidance, some mentorship, and course correction. They'll sit in accounting for a while. They'll sit in project management for a while, in the service managers area for a while. They'll even go out and hang out during project deployments and just kind of observe and offer, and again, not working, in the project or closing tickets, but just being there, kind of the reverse of the, what's the undercover boss? They're not undercover, they're there, but they're picking up on cues and understanding more the dynamics of the team and the staff. Because as you know, Rich, when we're, managing the business, we really don't think too much about going back down and sitting down and just being that, that data collection point, and just getting a sense and a pulse for how the business is running through the business units and through the individual team members.
Yeah, I really like this tip, and it is actually kind of apropos. We're talking about it in the same episode that we're talking about Facebook. In this day and age of social media platforms and collaboration platforms and so on, and all these great tools. There really still is, at the end of the day, no substitute for face-to-face direct experience of certain things to really understand what's going on. One of the reasons you do or should be doing quarterly business reviews with your customer is because there's really no substitute for sitting down across a table from your customer, looking them in the eyes, and really kind of getting a sense for how happy or unhappy is this customer, what's going on in their business. And it's the same thing inside your own business. You know, if you're doing the right things with your PSA tool, there are all sorts of great reports you can run that are going to give you a good, solid sense for how your business is performing. But you really do kind of need to get out there and see it for yourself. I think just intuitively, you know, in order to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are and where you have areas for improvement.
Absolutely. You know, and I remember when we're running our MSP practice, I mean, I'd sit in the bullpen too, right there in the service desk and the knock. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, I'd be listening to conversations that the technicians are having with clients. And then as they hang up, I'd say, hey, you know, Enrique, let's talk about that conversation you just had. You know, have you considered approaching it this way? Now, of course, it's connecting, not correcting, right? So it's kind of an art and a science to this, where you don't want to come down and make someone feel like, oh, they did something wrong. But it's, you know, the approach that you take. You know, next time someone says something like that, you know, approach it this way. And sometimes I'd even say, hey, put them on hold for a second, right? Because I'd hear the, you know, the friction that's happening. And then I'd give a little bit of guidance, and then they get back on and smooth things over. And, you know, that just comes from, you know, that experience that, you know, our longer term staff and managers and leadership have, that can really quickly help develop these newer or less mature staff members. And, you know, especially with millennials, I think they're a completely different breed. And I'm still, helping partners develop strategies to work with the next generation, because it is completely different than what any of us have experienced in the past.
And as you point out, there's a difference between coaching and managing, and I think the art that you're talking about there is more in that realm of coaching employees, helping them get better, fulfill their potential, as opposed to coming down on them for doing something wrong. So great stuff, and a partial moral of that tip is experience counts. So we have time for just one more story this week, and it's proof positive that experience counts. And I will say up front, this is 100% self-serving. This is coming to you from an editor who is now offering you more proof, if any was needed, that the world needs editors. On an earlier episode of the show, you might recall, we I believe called attention to a plane, an airliner that had the brand name misspelled on the tail. Because, no editor, nobody spotted it. Well, it turns out that there's a brand new $50 note, $50 bill in Australia, and it's got the word responsibility published or printed on the front of it, and it's misspelled. Now, not all that big a deal, right? It's really just the $50 note in Australia, except that's the most popular bill they make there, and they printed off 184 million of these things, and it spells the word wrong in 3 different places. So I would just say, get an editor involved. If you got words on paper, invite an editor into the process. You're going to avoid these kinds of embarrassments.
Who's responsible for that mishap?
Yeah. Well, that is all the time we've got this week on this episode of the ChannelPro 5-Minute Roundup. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back again next week with another episode for you. If you enjoyed this, if you might like to take a look at some older episodes, keep up with the new ones coming down the road, what you want to do is go onto YouTube and subscribe to the ChannelPro Network channel there, and you will get all the information about this program and some of the other videos that we have at ChannelPro. To read more about Cenex and Facebook partnering and get business growth tips and business growth strategies, all sorts of great information, You want to go to channelpronetwork.com on a daily basis. We've got news and other information going up there for you every day. To learn more about Eric and his business and the work he does with his clients, you want to go to ericsimpson.com. That is ERICK Simpson.com. And you will get all the information you need right there. We will be back again next week with another episode of the 5-Minute Roundup. Thank you again for joining us this week, and enjoy the rest of your week. Eric and I are enjoying the rest of your week already.